Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman. You're watching War Diary live with Arestovich. Hello Alexey. Good evening to your house and everybody else. Right, and to you in Washington, if you are there. All right. No disclosures, got it. It's an interesting week. I think that worst scenario that we talked about not too long ago, I think this is what's being realized now. And looking at this scenario, based on what we discussed, I'm sure I did not have any expectations that they would have signed any agreement in the United States. That's why I was thinking there'll be some event that will disrupt it. But when the information came out, that Zelensky came out, having not signed anything, I thought, well, yeah, it went as planned, I guess. Definitely in the vector that we agreed about before. What happened better than I expected, or worse, I guess, is that President Zelensky managed to somehow disrupt it in such a fiery fashion that half the world thinks that Trump and Vance are in charge of that disruption. And half of the Americans probably think that it's Trump to blame. Don't you agree that it's a pretty high actorship on Zelensky's behalf? Nikolai, if they put flagpole or just any pole instead of Zelensky, and Trump and Vance would be talking instead of Zelensky with that pole, or present just a table instead of Trump and Vance, the result would have been the same. Given that the pole or the table would not have signed anything as well, the result would likely have been exactly the same as we had. All right, so fact remains, the agreement was not signed. And it probably would have been signed by his representatives if he hasn't gone to the United States, right? So that was the only way to disrupt it. Right, exactly. To come to the United States and to not sign it. He, I think, picked the only opportunity left to him to disrupt it. The longer I am observing it, is that our dear friends from Britain and Europe have influenced Zelensky to guide the negotiation to not signing anything and to what happened. And what is happening now, if the way to look at it is that right now we do have a new Yalta, Tehran 25, whatever, and these guys were not invited. British are starting to ask question, why? Europe said, well, when Tehran 43 was happening, we were a little preoccupied with the Second World War, but the Brits are asking, what happened? We've been there last time. Why instead of us, it's now China? We need to send a message to Trump, to send a message that we disagree with such approach. However, they're in a pickle because they cannot send exact direct message to Trump that they're upset with him. They're too dependent on him and on the United States. So what they do instead, they take that poll with the name of Zelensky and put it in as a special weight to that negotiation. And that poll starts to wave his arms and legs and turns everything into scandal. And the scandal would not have been so loud if Europe did not follow up with this, because they've been probably watching it on their media, watching and confirming, yes, awesome, great moment, stand with Ukraine, we all stand with Ukraine, let's support Zelensky on his protest right now. And right after, they meet in London. As we learned in Soviet Union English language books, London is the capital of Great Britain. And they start to present the very strong support to Ukraine. Now let's examine that strong support. First of all, it's hugging Zelensky, a lot of hugs. They even got Starber, who is not too tactile, who very often doesn't even come to people, and British prime ministers have not been in public for a while. They probably have been last time when they were meeting Robinson Crusoe from the uninhabited island. But this time they came out and they hugged him, and they hugged him so long in the embrace. Second, and this was probably the first step was the biggest part of support. So second step, they promised to support Ukraine on a new level. Let's give them 5,000 small distance missiles to shoot down all the Russian UAVs. And people in Ukraine were thinking, 5,000, what are we doing? Are we going to take Vladivostok in Russia or Moscow? And then in a small script, in the next message, a day later, we learn that this is to be delivered until 2030 as a credit to be paid back. And this missiles are destined to shoot UAVs. Ukraine gets about 200 UAVs per night. So let's divide 5,000 by these 200 UAVs, right? Maybe for a month of defense, of intensive defense from Russia, right? So we took a credit till 2030 to stand for a month against Russian UAVs, right? So that you understand, this is the core ideation behind British and European relations with Ukraine. And then they also come and say to the podium that let's also create European army. We promised to do that. We need to do that. United States, we don't know if they will be standing with us. So we need to build our own army. Problem is they have some countries in EU who are saying that, well, we don't really see us building this army, or it's too complicated. It probably will take us a few years to even make a decision to formalize it right. And I want to remind our listeners that this is a fantastic organization, the European Union, that was correlating the electric plug in the wall for 15 years. They were negotiating about the standards. How long do you think it'll take them to negotiate European army? So let's also look at one other angle of help to Ukraine that they promise. On the 6th of March, there'll be a summit and we'll give you 100 billion euros. But for now, how about we give them, and somebody asks, maybe frozen Russian assets? Macron stands and says, no, we cannot do that. We can maybe give them percent from what is frozen. We cannot give the money themselves because the investors will not appreciate that. So they're out negotiating, consulting, talking of usual style of leftist globalists, a lot of warm, supportive words of Ukraine. Those Ukrainians who believe in strong support of Europe, they're jumping for joy and saying and pointing fingers, saying, look, the whole Europe is standing with us. And then today Trump comes out and says what I said in our stream last week, that Europeans paid more to Russia for oil, for natural gas and oil. They paid more to Russia as purchases than they gave money to Ukraine for fighting Russia. And the problem for Ukraine that comes out of it is that European Union technically is the biggest sponsor of Russia's war with Ukraine because they paid money that Russia used to produce those UAVs that are flying into our country and killing us, right? So a little uncomfortable statement there. Now, they don't have hundreds of billions. There'll be more declarations, but so that you understand, they will probably spend 100 billion euros on their European army during the next 3 years to get it to a point where it'll have a different geopolitical status. And somehow magically they're going to find another 100 billion euros for Ukraine. Where from? They'll be reselling Russian oil. So, and that main sponsor of this war, which is factually correct, is now saying that everything will be different now. The other point here is what will crown this agreement. And there are two cherries on this cake. One is from Britain, that, well, it didn't quite work well in the Oval Office, but Mr. Zelensky, or maybe Lord, Earl Zelensky, your task is now come to peace accords with Trump, because Trump is still important. Our relations with America is still important. That's what that was said after all the hugs. It's like Shakespearean drama, right? They can see on the cameras that they're hugging. They see Starbear hugging Zelensky, but in a Shakespeare style, the camera could zoom in closer to listen what he's whispering in his ear, that, fella, you need to return back to Trump and get back on good terms with him. And the rest of European leaders are saying the same. We understand your position. We appreciate your behavior in the Oval Office. You are the leader of the free world, but you also need to make friends again with the leader of the other part of the free world, with Donald Trump and his administration. Meantime, in Ukraine, half of Ukrainians don't give a damn about what's happening. Another half kind of supports that. And I'm also looking at different talking heads in Ukraine who are saying, well, we can fight without United States for another year. No big deal. And we have UAVs, and these drones will stop scary Russian aggression. I only have a question in this regard. If drones are so almighty and they're so fantastic in use, why you are converting drone operators to infantry and you're not doing it in the other direction? Because when the drones are so mighty, you probably need more operators, right? nuances. All right. I want to conclude that here with a couple more sentences, Nikolai. Wait a sec. So they basically making sure that Zelensky goes back to Trump and makes friendship again. Because Europe also mentioned that they are going to provide their own plan of peace with Russia because Trump's plan is so horrible, and that's why French and British will teach Trump how to strike peace accord with Russia. And they also said that they will be intermediary between Zelensky and Trump. And looking at the cunning face of Andrei Borisovich in his costume, I think he maybe partook in that. However, I don't know. I was suspecting in a joking way that he might have been a British spy. But again, a good self-respecting spy doesn't work for less than 3 different intel services. So whoever advised Zelensky, that was an interesting advice. All right, Alexey, summing it up, you think that all these 3 subjects separately or perhaps connectedly, they solve their own problems in regards to the war with between Russia and Ukraine and their relations with Russia. Oh yeah, they're all solving their own problems. It's just Macron and Brits are fighting against what's happening, and they're fighting each other to get a better position at the table with Trump and China. And as for the Germans, they're geopolitically castrated since 1945, at least, allegorically speaking. And of course, there is some bureaucracy in the EU that also is pursuing the same angle. All right, Alexey. So it appears that in any case, there was some information that Trump did not want to meet Zelensky. Yet Zelensky somehow pushed Macron, and Macron made Trump to agree. And finally, they've met. Nikolai, that reminds me of one of the biblical book's beginnings. One fella gave birth to another, the second gave birth to the third gave birth to that. And the same thing is probably told in the Arab tales. Ibn Khalib is telling you that story from Mardur, who heard it from the honest Said, and honest Al-Said heard it from Al-Hakim, who witnessed blah, blah, blah. And that story I will tell you. So, sorry, Macron did what? Right. It looks like Zelensky framed Macron then? That's what I'm going to ask Alexey. Can it affect on Macron's capabilities? Reflect on him? No, Nikolai, I think Macron probably framed Zelensky in this regard. Or maybe it's mutual. Or maybe Brits also intervened. But a very interesting feeling is that being suspected by a lot of observers with their smuts, that something is wrong, right? Something is off in that. That there was some interesting event that half of the people are now thinking that Trump and Vance set a trap for Zelensky, and the other half are thinking that Zelensky set a trap for Vance and Trump. But everybody thinks that there was some trap sprung. So I don't know whether knowingly or unknowingly, Vladimir Alexandrovich, he somehow performed one of the tasks of French Sécurité and MI6, but whoever was and again, theoretical MI6, right? Not the real one. So, all right. Alexey, there are a lot of statements around this, and we understand that Republicans like Lindsey Graham and other good people who've been helping Ukraine all these years, they are calling upon Zelensky to resign after that scene in the Oval Office. And he gave an answer to British journalists saying that regarding to suggestions for me to leave the position, it will not be easy. One thing would be to make sure that you hold elections. Second, you need to make sure that I am not part of these elections. I'm not running again. So you would have to agree with me. I think he's sending a very clear signal that he wants the other sides to negotiate the outcome with him. So my question is why Trump does not want to negotiate with Zelensky, including maybe his guarantees of security and safety, etc., and his for himself and his small circle of effective managers in Ukraine. Wink. And, Nikolai, scientists can call it an explicit method. The person can be saying, me personally, I will fly directly to the sun, as in that anecdote from about one little bird. It means that nobody's going to talk to him. And he knows that. All the politics are done behind the scene, behind the screens. If something is presented out to the public, it means that negotiations did not get them anywhere, that they've discussed and it somehow failed. That's the only case when they're using the public information. And one small test for profiling skills of our listeners. When a person is talking about the guarantees, when he gets very anxious and upset about guarantees, and his relations with the biggest supplier of arms end up in a scandal because of the security guarantees. But if you look back, we did sign something with America a couple of months ago about security guarantees. So what security guarantees is Zelensky talking about? Right. The only thing I think is his personal guarantees. Exactly. Personal guarantees. And there are some rumors. Are we going to talk about rumors today, Nikolai, or should we not? I don't know, Alexey. I don't really cherish the rumors, but national congressmen have commented on my behalf on some of the streams, in some very testing fashion. So, okay, sorry, Nikolai, about the troubles you're having in Ukraine. Let's then not go into rumors. Let's look at the facts. I'll send you a link and you maybe bring it up to the screen. I'll put it in that dark chat window. Where is it? Nikolai Feldman. Okay, here you are. Sending you, please put this screen up. And this is not from some unknown source. This is from president.gov.ua. This is from presidential site in Ukraine. All right, Dmitry, our technical support, please bring the picture up. Right, this is the guarantee for the whole country, right? And he needs his own guarantees? Well, he is saying in official statement, Nikolai, that I'm not leaving my position without guarantees of security for Ukraine. It's either guarantees or death, right? But look, bilateral safety agreement between Ukraine and United States. It was signed about half a year ago. Yeah, half a year ago exactly. And their PR campaign was trumpeted up around it. They also signed another 17 agreements with different countries. So what security agreements is Zelensky talking about? We've been running with that contract for half a year, finally convinced America to sign it, finally signed it, and now he's talking about new guarantees without even mentioning the previous one. Because the previous were not including certain elements, they're not good enough. What happened? Right? So the question, why is that not being commented? He could have come out and said, dear compatriots, citizens of Ukraine, you need to understand me, because these guarantees that we signed half a year ago are only for certain people and certain industries, and now we need to sign the real ones. So what's the difference, right? Well, because of maybe Biden administration, Alexey, because it was signed with Biden administration, and perhaps maybe Trump is saying, now you have to agree with me. Oh, I understand you, Nikolai. Zelensky also said another curious thing. He says that Trump comes and goes. In 4 years, there may not be any Trump. We need longer guarantees. And by the way, previous agreement was not disavowed, neither by Biden nor by Trump, from nobody. The previous agreement is still in force, right? It's still active. Nobody denounced it. And now we need different security agreements. I guess we'll ask for the third set of security guarantees with Vance or whoever comes later. Then an interesting story is, what security guarantees are we talking about? And I want to assure you here that the last month, while Trump is in power, every time when our dear president is saying that I am all for security guarantees, it implies that he is only caring about his own security guarantees and his immediate vicinity, his immediate people, his close circle of managers. So why nobody is giving it to him, Alexey? On what basis, Nikolai? First of all, they know that he is a corruptioneer who had stolen a lot of Ukrainian money. America knows it. They're already hinting at this, and there'll be soon results of investigations coming. They know that he was stealing American money too. This is a different story. This is actually a criminal prosecution. When Trump's son is posting, there'll be an interesting announcement, and it's very curious to see who will be arrested as a result of that. That's a hint, a very big, fat hint in Zelensky's direction. When director of FBI is coming out and saying that, well, we know that we're investigating where did some $1 billion go from the money that was sent to Ukraine, He's saying that when they already have investigated everything. Actually, Democrats already did. They're just acting. It's this government that's going to act on this. So what am I going to say here? Something smart. Sorry, I got a little carried away. Nikolai, can you refocus my question attention? I'm just talking about his personal security guarantees. Oh, right. So why do we give him personal security guarantees if maybe tomorrow he'll be an international criminal sought by an international court or Interpol? What's the basis for it? All right, Alexey, let me clarify the mechanics of it. So the logic that you announced or prognosticated before about how Trump will behave is the tactic of double ultimatum. Then you announced and prognosticated that ultimatum will be presented. It was presented technically in a very soft fashion with a deal of rare earth minerals, which Zelensky continued to disrupt by different actions. Certain political demarches, sending messages that Trump was not accepting him. Then Zelensky was screaming out to the media that he was not going to sign that. And then they finally agreed and he came over. And this was a soft discussion of Trump's ultimatum, which is also soft. Basically, let's sign the mineral deal and then we maybe will handle you softly too. So Trump's administration made a statement today that there'll be no signing until Zelensky publicly apologizes. And the second is that Ukraine failed by not signing this agreement to connect the whole generation of Ukrainians with the United States for up to 25 years while the rare resources are being mined. Do you feel that? It's almost as long as the Ukraine independence. And we were given different guarantees that nobody will be attacking our country while American investments are here. Vance and Trump already disclosed the whole mechanism, and Rubio came out, even though by political standards they shouldn't have said that, but they felt that they kind of have to because Ukraine is not getting it. And there'll be American investments, there'll be Chinese investments, there'll be Arab investments. These are better guarantees than joining NATO. Zelensky knows it. He was told that. Because NATO, whether it will fight for you, whether it will not, we are seeing how NATO is working or not. Macron is already saying that NATO is losing its value. Baltic countries not even sure that they will be defended if there is any aggression against them. But American and Chinese investments, that is a crucial stone that will never be attacked. Because if any threat, there'll be a whole American army on your doorsteps figuring out why are you trying to take away their resources. And I'm not even talking that Putin, by the way, agreed to scale down his military resources by 50%. He said that's an interesting suggestion, so indicating he's open to discussion. And the world is changing vector to trade and commerce instead of war now. While our Ukrainian president is sending a strong message that no, we will continue fighting unless we get those special guarantees. And you know what paradoxical here is? That 78-year-old Trump is representative of a new commercialized world, while 48 Zelensky is representative of the old one. That thing sometimes happen. When I was asked in a personal communication by somebody, what is it, Alexey? I said, this is the new world being birthed in pain. And people they're divided now, the ones for the past and the ones for the future. And my Ukrainian compatriots, unfortunately, are repeating the same trick that they've been doing for 400 years already. The moment the new world is upon us, they go and bet on the old world, on the old order. And it's the same mistake they're making over and over again. There is a thing called acknowledgement, understanding. Usually it comes realization. It comes through pain to people. Only some very advanced people who are way above the trauma and all that level, they can understand that from the philosophic effort and looking at the events happening to others. For the masses, it comes through pain. So for Ukraine, the last 400 years sound like this. We will continue to feel pain and experience pain as long as it's necessary. We may even die doing that, but we're not going to adopt and accept your new world. We are not going to let you do that. We are against it. You should notice that 1918, Ukraine bets on the lost losers again. The main country is already lost, and Ukraine is signing a treaty with the lost part, even though allies suggested that Ukraine signed a treaty with Entente, with the ones who won. Then All these Cossack movements, they also were betting on the losing sides. So this is a very understandable pattern of behavior of Ukrainian subconsciousness at large. And it's interesting to observe that there are actually a lot of people who are not signing up with the Zelensky trip. Those people who are refusing to jump on Zelensky's bandwagon. So there is some good optimism there. But overall, at large, Zelensky is still insisting. Trump and Rubio were risking quite a bit when they were explaining and clarifying that they will be owning production in Ukraine, and this will be, in its own way, security guarantees. And they were facing possible backlash from Putin. But Putin actually is staying mum because he understands that he was already agreed with, and he is holding his face to let the events play out. And Zelensky instead is choosing war. When he is not signing anything, when he is not taking these security guarantees, he's saying, I've chosen war and will continue fighting. And Ukrainian media runs around saying, the army is with the president, people are with the president, we're going to fight till the end, till we win. But look at my hands. Ukraine military budget lost 50% somewhere. So it was only produced for 55%. Zelensky's government weakened the army by 55% at his own accord. And nobody wants to ask him, Vladimir Alexandrovich, why so? We understand that you're fighting for Ukraine. Understand maybe it was not you, maybe there are other people responsible. What measures will be taken? Who will be punished? Why only half of the materials of the armaments produced, even though 100% were funded? And Ukraine media is just continuing to scream that we'll stand with the president. Meantime, this is the same person that took 50% of armaments from our military. This is the conflict in his presentation, because he is fighting for Ukraine, but he at the same moment stealing 50% of their military resources. And now imagine Ukraine leaving or getting left by American support and staying without United States support. And then our media screams internally that that's perfect, that's good for us, right? How? How are we going to fight for the whole year? We barely could hold everything when we had everything, when we had the resources that America was giving us. And then we also have notes from Europe coming saying that we actually are reviewing a probability that we can step in and cover the main cities of the United States with our own resources, and we'll probably supply you with some tea. We'll probably give you our own. By the way, they only have maybe a dozen. And these machines will not be able to replace Patriots just by their tactical characteristics. They're nowhere near. So previously, it was only Ukraine that was conducting systemically unsupported policies in the world. But I'm observing that Europe is also now falling into the same pitfall. However, I know that Europeans are more cunning, and they're using the head of Zelensky to break the gate into Trump's castle. But Trump is staying pretty fortified. He understands that Europe can do nothing without American support. I heard some serious fellows from top-level British military circles who are saying that we really do not like America, but we understand that without their support, we're done with. So now let's take Zelensky and put him on one side of the weight and United States on the other side of the weight. Which one do you think is heavier in the eyes of European partners? How long do you know Zelensky? They know Zelensky for maybe 6 years and Ukraine for 34 years. How long does Europe know United States? How many wars have they fought together? How much is dependent upon the United States? That's why we understand the choice that they'll make. And that's why they told Zelensky that you need to go and make peace with Trump. Meantime, in Ukraine, they're still screaming, Europe is with us. Look how they hugged Zelensky. Even Starberg came out to hug Zelensky. At this moment, Starberg comes out and says, oh, no problem. We'll even send British soldiers to Ukraine and we'll create a no-flight zone. And everybody in Ukraine are cheering again, not noticing that it's under an asterisk in a small font that this will happen after the peace treaty is signed. Right? Little nuance. A bit uncomfortable. Interesting, Alexey. Don't even know where to run with these news. All right, I see three more options for the events to unfold. One is continuous pacification between Zelensky and Washington, D.C. Second option is pause that Zelensky may take. Or the third option is escalation. And according to the dramaturgy of this event, I think it is now up to Trump because Zelensky made his move. He misbehaved in the Oval Office, and that's probably some personal questions as well to Trump or from Trump to Zelensky. I actually hear interesting rumors about Zelensky's behavior off cameras, whether he misbehaved in the Oval Office, because there is some interesting information floating around. I don't know, Nikolai, about these rumors, but I know the nickname that White House dwellers gave to Zelensky. And unfortunately, since he is a president, even though I do not like him a lot, I cannot call him this name. So I'll tell what the name is after he is done being president. All right, Alexey, so what do you think will happen? Pacification, pause, or escalation? What our compatriots need to understand, those who are sitting under the Russian UAVs and Russian missiles, first of all, they need to understand Putin likely will not escalate things on the front. He will not use the argument between Trump and Zelensky, that conflict, to his favor. He will not be using this and the gaps in our air defense systems on a systematic base to advance his position in Ukraine occupation. Maybe once to show off, but that's it. And it's not because he is a fluffy bunny and suddenly became good and saw the truth and light. No, because he already has agreement with Chinese and with Trump about the next 10, 15 years regarding Arctic seas, regarding the oil reserves, regarding the world order. He doesn't want to risk that. Most likely Russia will hold from this, from their brash actions on the front, because this will mean quarreling with Trump, and Russia cannot afford it. And in the United States, 46% actually in favor of supporting Ukraine, 41% are against it. So the United States is very divided on this matter. And Trump, of course, with that percentage and just his personal ethical qualities, will not allow Russian ballistics to fall on the heads of Ukrainian kids. So, of course, he will not be forgiven if he completely turns off everything. And Zelensky also is in a pinch because he likely will not be forgiven if even his citizens will start seeing some light, if they will start feeling the pain. So Zelensky and Trump will likely come to some agreement. They will still, of course, go the actions on the front. Russians will continue their systemic fighting actions, will just without adding any vigor to it, but the standard grinding machine will still be there. And that brings me to the piece of the movie 17 Moments of Spring that I like to quote, when Miller is saying that Adolf Hitler is not capable of making any decisions anymore. So the destiny of Germany and the destiny of Führer need to be separated. And that's what I'm seeing in the future for Mr. Zelensky. And I'm saying that Russians will also not intensify their fight on the front, so Zelensky probably will not see that, but they will likely strike peace between Zelensky and Trump. Alexey, I wanted to clarify more about escalation in terms of Zelensky. Well, yeah, he of course will face a backlash in Ukraine a little later. Right now, there is some anti-Zelensky posts about, and America is posting some of those. And in Ukraine, presidential and government media are saying this is anti-Ukrainian campaign in the United States, that they're posting our videos of how we recruit people on the streets and throw them in the buses. And I want to say this is not America against you. This is your own government against you, because that's what your government is doing. It's turning our beloved country in a concentration camp. When they're forbidding the artists to leave the country, when they grab people out on the streets, it's probably easier to leave North Korea these days than leave Ukraine. So we can see that Zelensky is indeed a thorn in American thigh and is preventing United States in realizing their geopolitical aspirations. And this is not a black mark like pirates used to use in the Treasure Island and the like. This is actually probably a black plug, because Zelensky is too much of a plug for United States. And I want to say once again here that nobody will allow Zelensky to be such a blocker on the way to their coveted milestones, and that blocker will very likely be quickly removed from the road. Of course, I mean not in a political, not in the physical sense, but in a political sense. Probably publication of different materials about him that he will have to step down. Of course, he probably still has the chance to apologize, but Zelensky and apologize, they don't really go well together. He doesn't even understand how well he was played by somebody in his immediate vicinity with these steps, according to probably aspirations of some theoretical MI6 or whatever other European intel service, who are using Zelensky as a puppet to make sure that Europe is also present at this deal, just to make sure that they have a place at the table during this new world agreement. They don't really support Ukraine. The easiest way for them to support Ukraine would be just to accept Ukraine into European Union. And they don't even declare that. They know that they won't. So all this support is just fairy tales of Viennese forest. And if people want to believe that they will be adopted, they can believe and will believe. There's nothing that can change it. So in your logic, Alexey, Trump will not refuse from his dual ultimatum logic that he presented to both sides. We already understand what happened in Russia. Nothing is clear about Ukraine, but there'll be likely some escalation motions about Zelensky and his team that we'll observe in the nearest future. Right, nearest future, Nikolai, I think it might get to even sanctioning him. All right. Do you think that the sanctions against the representative of Zelensky's team will be taken very negatively, both in Ukraine, in Europe, and in the United States? Only, Nikolai, if the sanctions are not warranted. But if you first present an explanation how much and where have they stolen, that will be probably a different story. Well, it'll take an effort to explain all that, right, Alexey? There's not much effort. You just publish a thing in New York Times or somewhere on Zelensky's corruption schemes in Ukraine. And at first, you don't need to maybe implicate Zelensky in it, just show his wallets and his immediate vicinity. But if he continues to stay stubborn, then they can indicate and show his own participation in these schemes, all the cryptocurrency transactions that he is entertaining himself with, getting rich on the blood of Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian mothers who are hiding their kids in the corridors behind the double walls. All right, let's expand on this thought, maybe. If the United States indeed sanctioned Zelensky and his management team and published a big research, and maybe even opposition in Ukraine somehow published a research, and suddenly in that investigation, and suddenly public opinion in Ukraine only says that this is Trump's revenge. This is just Putin infecting Trump with his ideas. And, dear President, we're still with you. What would be then, Alexey? Well, then, Nikolai, it will imply that Ukrainian public opinion will take the whole responsibility, first, for continuation of war, and second, for supporting the corrupt leader of the country. All right, let's proceed, Alexey. What else? Well, it'll mean that the blame will be on Zelensky and people supporting him. And you need to distance yourself when this information is going to come out. Everybody who will continue supporting Zelensky regime will be deemed personally responsible. Because right now they're supporting Zelensky, and those are our viewers who do. You're supporting Zelensky without any reason, but after the publication is out, you'll have no reason to still support him, unless you want to be part of that regime. Because if you do, you're voting for that regime, for all this corruption and all this stuff. And internet, there's an interesting meme. There are two tables. One is drafting table. The second is express support to the president. And there's a huge line going to that second table. And you know what? I've seen a ton of men, actually pants-wearing men who shave sometimes in Ukraine and outside, who are saying that we are supporting the president. Well, I'm telling them, my friend, if you support the president so much, why you're not getting recruited to the front? Go and fight for this war. Go and fight for this president. Another thing, Alexey, I wanted to bring up, I don't want to share that site and that video, but another service member of Ukrainian military who recorded a very resonance video, had about 1 million views on TikTok, who is telling that these contracts for 18 to 24-year-old guys in Ukraine, this is a spit in the direction of armed forces of Ukraine. And 2 weeks pass, and he records a different video. Dear President, all the blame and all the attacks you suffered in the Oval Office of the United States, they do not deserve your integrity, and we will continue fighting for you and for our country in the trenches, be what may. So this is the same person, Alexei. This is not just civilians. There is also a divide apparently going through military as well, who fail to understand the correlation between continuation of this war and Zelensky. Well, Nikolai, I will agree here that some people do believe that Trump indeed sold his soul to Putin and wants to give Ukraine to Putin. You cannot argue with them. That's their theory, and they don't want to step down of this soapbox. But the reality is Trump has not sold his soul to anybody. Trump is working for the United States. And all these theories are based on lies. The reality is different. And it's the same Ukrainian cycle that we are seeing repeated again. Since I do not agree with this reality, I'm not going to participate in this reality constructively. And these people write to me in their comments, Alexey, you will not achieve anything. Well, guys, fellas, for those who survive, reality will finish you off. The rest will be buried. And perhaps some of you will live, especially the ones who recognize the reality the way it is. And the principle is very simple for this divide. The ones who can accept, without judgment and all, the world as it is, and the ones who will not. And those, the second group will get stuck in their legends and myth-making. And we'll probably be looking at our Ukrainian anthem that says Ukraine is still not dead in one of the verses. Seems like Ukraine needs to die in some capacity in order for us to change. Because our slogan seems to be, it's either how we want or we die. Our way or death, right? So, a funny situation here, Alexei. Poroshenko comes out. Zelensky actually slapped Poroshenko with his sanctions. President Trump comes out, says that Zelensky is a sort of dictator in Ukraine. But since Poroshenko and his friends like Portnikov have been peddling the ideological story of decolonization, they're failing to say anything in their own defense, and they have to continue supporting Zelensky to their own demise. That's an interesting situation here. Oh yeah, our Ukrainian opposition has no brains. I'm looking at these great oppositioners like Poroshenko, an ex-president, Yulia Tymoshenko. Zelensky wants to put Yulia in jail. He arrested the judge who reigned in her favor on some criminal prosecution case a few years ago. As I remember, the judge was recently placed in jail. That's a signal to Julia, we're getting to you. Poroshenko is also under sanctions. And what are they doing? They're uniting with Zelensky, with our leading power in Ukraine. I don't want to even talk about this opposition. There is also a different opposition that's divided, right? But this 50% of it, I will say some expletives without any voice. There is no other characteristics. And whether they are serving in the military or they are retirees somewhere in Toronto, Canada, everybody sets his own price. You've taken a position, you're paying the price. That's it. You can go fight for all Zelenskys in the world, you set the price for that. And who's supporting Zelensky now? Those people who set the price in a certain fashion. They're supporting the corruptioneer who is stealing their money, especially those active service members. They're supporting the person who destroyed the foreign policies of Ukraine, the person who failed to fulfill the military production order for the last year, and who essentially stole half of what needs to be produced, and the person who continues to appeal to war, knowing that this war will cause more deaths. He needs to stay in power, he wants to stay in power for a few months at the cost of losing more territories and more lives, just to trade for some personal security guarantees from Trump. Because they already know that there'll be publications. And that's why he will be burying more soldiers who may, some of them support him because of some short-sightedness, and civilians who will also suffer. I did not expect some of our compatriots to be so naive. I understood that a lot of them are not too bright and not too smart, but when you see Tymoshenko and Poroshenko, who are being attacked by Zelensky, running towards Zelensky to support him, I can say that they fail at having political sense, that they're looking for cheap support that will get diluted very soon. They will jump on a couple percent, but a month later there'll be no support. And they gave up their position as oppositioners. There is no real opposition in Ukraine at the moment. The only real opposition is sitting here in this stream at Nikolai's show and is saying the way things are. That's it. That's the only opposition, unfortunately, Ukraine has. There are a lot of people who dispel and who bring to light a lot of the corruption happening in Ukraine, but I'm probably the only one among them who has some political aspirations and who has a very straightforward platform. And the rest is nothing. And that's a very puny opposition, what they turned into. It's sad to me that our citizens are losing their authority so easily. They're exchanging millions for cents. This is a very situational philosophy. There is no long-term thinking here. There's no strategy here. And that's one of our issues, unfortunately. And a lot of our citizens do not think beyond one post on Facebook that I support our president. It would be so nice if they thought for a week ahead. And it would be fantastic if they thought in a generational time frame, as Trump suggested. So now these people, if they continue pushing Ukraine towards war, they will be suffering the consequences of these decisions, and they likely will fail to understand, to recognize their own guilt in this. It's another very Ukrainian feature. They'll be rationalizing it in many ways, that it's Trump, Masons, aliens, Arestovich, whoever wants, but not us. And they'll be saying that this is the only path. We are not to turn. We continue to follow our path, and we cannot be mistaken. It's a very Ukrainian story. To make a mistake, to poop your pants, and to refuse noticing it, and instead walk with a straight back and saying that I'm all right. These people might actually end up dying as a result of this, of being so stubborn, but we need to realize that half of our country is like this. Yes, they've been deceived. Yes, a lot of cognitive war technologies were used against them. Yes, they were told a lot of silly things and fake things about freedom and partners and everything else. But reality is an interesting thing. When it comes, it just smashes things right. And the positive news is that we do have a second part of the Ukrainian citizens who understand almost everything, or at least intuitively understand the picture. And they get the memo that Trump actually wants good for Ukraine. We'll be betting on this second group. Let's see how it goes. All right, let's dig a little more, Alexey, in that thing with the personal guarantees. First of all, full-scale war. None of us on the territory of Ukraine, during our lives, we have not faced a full-scale war until this one started back in 24th of February 2022. And I don't know, but it seems to me that a lot of people are engaged in decision-making together with President Zelensky. We remember his stories about Tatarov, who participated in solving some Chechen matters during this war. Where I'm leading with this is that there is a group of people whom Zelensky can protect, and he can do it rather openly. Even when the head of his office maybe made a mistake, or maybe he was pushed by MI6, he can still probably motivate Zelensky, saying that, look, all these cryptocurrency transfers were done for the good. We were doing that in order to support us. Yes, we made mistakes, but we need all to have some guarantees, and we need you to provide these guarantees for us. You are our wall. So maybe that's what inspired him to be in such a position against Trump. And maybe he is honestly taking this position. And I'm thinking, is it really so difficult to understand Zelensky and give him some guarantees if he's the only obstacle to peace? If he's so large and so powerful block on the way to peace, and the only condition he's asking for is some guarantees for his person and his friends, why is it so difficult for Trump? Because nobody believes him, Nikolai. That's one. Second, they know that he was stealing American taxpayers' money. American president cannot betray United States. He cannot guarantee Zelensky anything, because the moment he does, there'll be some officer from FBI coming out and saying that, look, our president is giving guarantees to people who had stolen taxpayers' money, basically an organized crime group, and he is covering for them. This is one of the worst crimes in the country. He just amnestied them. Do you think Trump will fare well after that? He will be facing impeachment then, and I don't think he will exchange his own impeachment for Zelensky's impeachment. This is an obvious thing. Well, this is a difficult situation, Alexey, then. We do have a vector when the public opinion in Ukraine will be deteriorating, and it will, concerning Trump's actions about peace track, Zelensky will probably still be in opposition. Those supporting Zelensky will be jumping for joy and will be peddling more how well did we hit American imperialists in their own Oval Office. So the situation will continue to exacerbate, and I think Ukraine can get stuck in this for a while. If this is the only obstacle to peace, maybe there are some compromises that can be struck. Maybe American diplomacy has some options for these situations, or there are no precedents. Well, today we heard that when Zelensky said it's a long way to end this war, Trump did mention that this is a big mistake on Zelensky's part to think this way. And I'm thinking they'll come up with some understanding, with some theory. Trust me, American politics is crafty. Trump's administration even more so. So there is an interesting event to expect coming from them. This is the joy of freedom and of, optionality. You never know what will come out of things. All right, Alexey, one more question about supporting Ukraine with arms. Security data, cybersecurity, satellite support, American software, firmware on the weapons, not only on the weapons, on the transport vehicles and other things. This will be affecting American manufacturers too, maybe? Do you think United States will go for limiting their military-industrial complex in some fashion? Nikolai, look at the Putin's interview 4 to 5 days ago. Trump suggested Russia to diminish military expenditures by 50%. The share of support to Ukraine from the United States is 0.25. And do you think if they're going for such a compression of military expenditures bilaterally, are they ready to not supply whatever's left for Ukraine? To compare, American Army has about 1,000 Patriots available. Armed and ready, less than that, but in general, they have about 1,000. In Ukraine, we have 6. They're not losing anything if they stop supporting us. Also, Trump is to make a speech with the Congress. He'll be presenting his own politics, his own world vision, peace through economy, that he'll continue working with Russia, with China, basically voicing the details of agreement that's already drafted. And he will probably be making his voters happy that with the military contracts that Biden signed, and perhaps he'll discontinue some of them. And by the way, don't be mistaken, 75% of this money stay in the United States anyway. So in this case, there probably will be some support in Ukraine growing to Zelensky. Is that the only way we're looking forward? Because if you are still supporting your president and supporting this war, then it should change. It's not the drafting commission will be chasing citizens. Citizens should be chasing the drafting commission to get drafted. Right? Do you think it's real? All right, so another side of this question, like say, limiting the intel support, limiting the arms support to Ukraine, how will that go? Nobody knows for sure, Nikolai. They are solving a difficult dilemma because nobody will support Russian missiles falling on the kids of civilians and killing children. And first of all, they themselves will not support that because they are deeply religious people in many cases. And they're solving a difficult task of punishing Zelensky while he is also a leader of Ukraine, the face of Ukraine, and the supreme commander of Ukraine. It is very difficult to punish, in quote, Zelensky while trying not to affect other systems because nobody's really punishing Zelensky. It's just they realize different political measures against him as an obstacle in the roadmap for Trump's politics. So it's difficult to punish him in quotes without affecting other things. There likely will be some effects. But here's a couple of examples for you. Do you know why our air defense system is so effective? Because from Americans, we usually know the areas where Russians will be attacking us, usually 24 hours before that attack, sometimes 3 days in advance. Basically, the moment after they make a decision that they will be attacking certain spots. And our air defense systems maneuver in that time frame to take the most advantageous positions to cover for those parts. That's why when Russians break through, that's only because we did not either have enough air defense systems to cover it, or maybe Russians changed something at the last moment. And, one can stop providing this intel data without telling out to public. You still have patriots in Ukraine, but America stops sending us this data about Russian attacks. Some technical glitch may even be cited, right? That would be a signal that Zelensky will understand. Of course, this is the signal that costs civilian lives, because at the end of it, the missiles are hitting civilians and citizens of the country. But they're sending a signal, guys, you either deal with your president or you have to suffer the consequences. If you continue to support your president, that's the consequences you'll face. And recently, Pavel Shelin made a very genius statement. He said, could Ukraine have a right to ask to join NATO? Of course, Ukraine could have asked. Could have Ukraine conduct anti-Russian politics? Of course, nobody can take that away. Could Ukraine gradually turn into anti-Russian government conducting anti-Russian politics on the border with Russia? Of course, nobody can forbid you, right? But they had the right, and it could have done it. But Ukraine technically cannot remove itself, detach itself from the consequences of these politics. In this world, you can do anything you like, but you cannot free yourself from consequences of your actions. And consequences sometimes differ from what was expected. Many people think that life is like a drafting board. Didn't work out this time, I'll jump to the next track next time. But life, you cannot really jump and change and relive it again that easily, right? So every decision has its consequences. When we wanted to join NATO, we got our own consequences. Now we're quarreling with Trump, drafting memes and caricatures about him. It'll have its own consequences. I don't know the scale of it, and I hope that Trump and Putin will be smart enough not to break the new Yalta agreement without affecting our civilians in Ukraine and causing more suffering. And one can only send his regards to Zelensky and say that congratulate him on becoming the main roadblock in American politics for the next decade. And this is not something that was devised recently. This is something that was devised over decades. We can actually name people who were the same roadblocks in the United States politics before. General Soleimani in Iran, right? Saddam Hussein under President Bush. Gaddafi, don't remember who was the president at that time. These were people who were as blockers on the road for American politics. And their lives didn't quite work out well for them. There was a bipartisan thing in the United States, right? When decisions were made. Well, yeah, but it's not so important. Whenever you become an obstacle of that caliber for that much of a machine, you at some point will stop being an obstacle, one way or another. So in regards to United States, Alexey, do you think that this Zelensky's demarche and his behavior and his actions to break the agreement, to interrupt the signing of the documents, that it created additional reason for existence of Democrats in the United States? They woke up and joined and started marching and doing stuff. Do you think that could threaten Trump's rule in the United States? Yeah, I keep hearing that from some Ukrainians, that sooner or later Trump will face an impeachment and we just need to hang on for a year against Russia on the front and then another year with Trump till he be impeached after the next Congress elections. And then everything will be all right. The moment you hear everything will be as before, I'm quoting Voland here, it never is as it was before, from Master and Margarita. And that naivete that you can come back to the early days when you removed Trump, Well, I can remind them that if Trump goes away, Vance will be the next president. And Vance is not Trump. He'll be a much harsher one. End of the first hour.